2 decades of modern cartel wars have transformed Mexico's underworld. Criminal syndicates have morphed into heavily armed, militarized units that now control great swathes of Mexican territory. Most of the fentanyl and cocaine entering the US transits through Mexico. So more than half a century after President Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs,
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
President Donald Trump has turned this metaphorical war into a real one, aggressively targeting what he calls narco-terrorists.
The epicenter of cartel violence is Mexico.
His drug policy has escalated into a direct military campaign to target regimes and the dealers. And now Trump is pressuring Mexico to take on the cartels. So is the war on drugs working, or are the Mexican cartels still calling all the shots? One of the most powerful and violent cartels in Mexico is the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación. For years, their leader, Nemesio Ceguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, ruled with an iron fist.
He was known for being very shrewd, very smart, being very brutal when he needed to be, and using violence like a scalpel whenever he needed to.
He emerged really as a very effective CEO of this new cartel. And one of the things he did was he leveraged alliances with other cartels. At the same time, he was sort of totally unabashed about setting up the private army. The Jalisco cartel had very serious weaponry, serious armored vehicles, and totally not shy about showing these off.
He built an empire with an estimated $50 billion in assets. But that all changed on the 22nd of February, 2026. Mexican special forces, backed by US intelligence, fatally wounded El Mencho during a fierce shootout. He died in a helicopter while being transported to Mexico City.
In terms of how the operation actually occurred, we need to understand the bigger backdrop. And the bigger backdrop is that the United States and Mexico have a long history, and there are ebbs and flows to it, but there's a long history of strategic cooperation related to narcos. First and foremost, the United States is oftentimes providing useful intelligence, and then the Mexicans, particularly vetted units, are acting as fugitive apprehension teams.
The Trump administration has been completely clear that it believes a decapitation strategy, i.e. targeting the leaders of these cartels, is a legitimate and effective, it believes, way of reducing their power.
A cutthroat drug cartel is fighting back after its leader was shot and killed today.
Nemesio Ruben Osquera Cervantes.
El Mencho caught and killed in a dawn raid.
Authorities hoped they had weakened the CJNG. But within hours of El Mencho's death becoming public, cartel operatives and affiliated armed groups launched violent reprisals across multiple states. Gunmen set up roadblocks, firebombed vehicles, and clashed with police across much of Mexico. And with no clear heir to take over the mantle of command, a succession crisis unfolded. What did the joint operation with the US actually achieve? And instead of a reduction in drugs, did it just create a chaotic power vacuum? When the death of their leader was confirmed, the response from the CJNG was instantaneous. Their cartel quickly adopted a scorched earth tactic known as the narco's revenge.
The CJNG response was pretty visceral. I mean that in the sense that what we saw across the country in more than 20 states, the CJNG effectively put into place narco blockades, set vehicles on fire, shut down critical choke points, in essence to show their response, their disapproval, to try to intimidate the government.
It was giving a message as high profile as it possibly could that you may get the guy in charge of us, but we're bigger than that, and we have a network across this entire country. It was very, very important to remember this was not just a visible revenge in Jalisco state, it was across 20 states across the entire country. So that is alarming for the people of Mexico and the people around the world. You've got to bear in mind this was just a few months before the World Cup was going to be hosted. So it was an absolutely clear strategy to say, we won't be defeated just by the removal of one man.
Once reprisals began to subside, however, thoughts turned to who would assume control in El Mencho's wake. El Mencho left behind a massive empire, but no clear heir. His biological son and natural heir, El Menchito, is currently serving a life sentence in a US prison for drug trafficking, firearms offenses, and orchestrating extensive violence.
Another person in the spotlight has been Mencho's wife, Rosalinda González Valencia, the sort of heiress to an important cartel family, seen as a very capable financial operator.
El Mencho's stepson, Juan Carlos Valencia González, alias El 03, emerged as the leader.
It's pretty clear that 03 has taken over the organization. I believe he was born in California, and that poses certain privacy difficulties for intelligence gathering given that he is a US citizen.
For decades, the US and Mexican governments have relied on the kingpin strategy. If you cut off the head of the snake, the body will die. But when a top leader is removed, it triggers 3 distinct effects. There's the risk that rival organizations could exploit the power vacuum to seize control of territory, shipping routes, and markets.
We've seen a fairly muted response from other cartels in response to this, and that's in part because the cartels that would have been most viable in terms of actually confronting the CJNG have actually gone into civil war. Specifically, the Sinaloa cartel has gone into civil war since the summer fall of 2024 between factions loyal to the Chapitos, the sons of Chapo Guzman, and Los Mayos, led by the sons of Mayo Zambada.
Instead of collapsing, decapitated cartels can split into smaller, more ruthless splinter factions.
The CJNG has put a successor in place fairly quickly. As a result, there hasn't been internal fragmentation thus far that other cartels could have taken advantage of.
Without El Mencho's central authority, intelligence analysts warn the cartel could violently fracture as commanders turn on each other in a brutal fight for supremacy.
Jalisco's sort of way it was formulated and the way that Mencho ran it means that it survives his demise because it's a franchise. You know, it's like, to use a sort of bad example perhaps, it's like, you know, if you take away the CEO of McDonald's, it doesn't mean that the whole brand collapses. He has spread himself out and sort of given people training effectively about how to run this organization that means that it has survived his own decapitation.
While his death represented a major tactical milestone for President Sheinbaum and US intelligence agencies, it simultaneously thrust Mexico into a precarious new phase of instability.
It is very difficult to predict, but what I have learned in studying Mexico for going on 20 years now in Mexico security issues is that the smartest play is to essentially bet on the status quo to continue. And that is an unfortunate and sad reality, but the status quo is likely to continue. We're likely to continue to have major organized crime issues in Mexico, certainly for the short and medium term.
Sheinbaum is facing immense diplomatic pressure from President Trump to take an even harder line against cartels. But when the government successfully kill or capture a cartel leader, violence actually increases and the drug trade gets worse, not better. And as long as the root causes of US drug demand are not addressed, a decentralized network will always adapt to supply it. And it is the everyday civilians who ultimately pay the highest price.